All right, what's up, y'all? Connor is back, and we are talking about the sixth book in the Horus Heresy series, Descent of the Angels. Now, this was a really good book, not because I'm not only a Dark Angels fan, but it was just I like fantasy and medieval fantasy, and Caliban is a really good kind of segue into that. So, I mean, right off the bat, it's a good book. But I'm gonna say this right now, and I think a lot of people are of the same mindset. It's kind of strange to go from Fulgrim to Descent of the Angels because Fulgrim was a really wild ride, and it's kind of like you're getting this is like almost I would say a filler episode almost. So we're going all the way from Great Crusade 30K to sort of jumping all the way back in time to you know really early Great Crusade because the book takes place. It takes four parts, so it's Caliban, Beast, Imperium, and then and then it says Crusade. So we're following Zahariel and not Nemiel. They're cousins, and they're on Caliban. And the first part is essentially where we get to see Zahariel get sort of inducted or tries to get inducted into the Knights of Caliban. And we see Luther, but Luther's not mentioned by name there because he's just a hooded figure. Cypher, but then I found out that Cypher was a title, and I thought, the character Cypher. But then it's kind of funny because this Cypher in this book, I may not even be the Cypher that we're aware of in present day 40K, but part one is essentially world building for a Caliban that has not been introduced into the Imperium, and it's still super early. Like Old Knight has only kind of ended a couple decades ago, it seems like. So we're getting a glimpse into this really early 30K life perspective, especially on a death world that is like Caliban. So honestly, it's good, but I'm gonna kind of warn you right now if you want to read it, if you're a Dark Angels fan or you're reading the Heresy in order like I am, it's kind of a really big it's delayed gratification when it comes to if you're into the bolter and violence aspect of it like I enjoy the battle sequences in these books. With the Dark Angels, however, that really takes a while. Your first real induction to the battle capabilities of Zahario and Nemiel would be in part two. So part one is just building up who they are, that Zahariel's descendant from some minor noble family, and of course Cypher is educating him, and there's a bunch of knights in the order who educate him and Nemiel, and they go through their own trials, and it's just really setting up a foundation for Caliban and what's going on in Caliban and who these two young kids are and why they're trying to join the knights. So it's there's not a lot to talk about in part 1 because it's really just world building for Caliban, and it's nothing super remarkable, honestly, I would say. I mean, it's cool to get a glimpse into the cultures of the homeworld. Like, this is really like, I don't know anything about Cathonia or Chemos or any of them. So this is really the first instance where I'm getting to see the homeworld while it's still there, because I know the Rock and everything's no longer super present in 40K. So yeah, part 1 isn't exactly action packed. It's very dialogue heavy, very establishing that the Dark Angels, or at this point the Knights of Caliban, are not secret order, but there's inner circles on inner circles, and we later find out that of course the inner circles are made to protect the knights of the lower orders, and it goes so on so on so forth until the Lion's in charge, whatever. It's cool, but again, it's really, and I don't mean this in a bad way. It's just very slow. To me, it feels like, I know it's in hindsight, it's a quick book, but it's just kind of at points it's kind of a snooze fest because it just keeps dawdling on. And also, they're children, but they talk very sophisticated. They're very introspective, and I think some people might have critiques of that, but for me, it's like they're growing up on a feudal world, and I'm sure that there's a different mindset there, and they're raised to think a certain way and act a certain way. And I'm sure when you're getting inducted to the knights, chivalry and all these things you have to acclimate to a certain way of life and speech and whatnot. So I kind of get that these like 9 year olds at the beginning, 9 to 10 year olds, should not be even remotely talking the way that they are, but they do. And 40K is a silly, it's a wacky little setting where random shit happens all the time. So part two is more interesting because now Nemiel and Zahariel are in the order. They're not knights per se, I think, at this point, but they're like a step below knights, and they're going into it. And there's some really interesting building here, not with Zahariel yet, but with Luther and the Lion. So I'm gonna get right to that, but first I gotta do this. All right, sorry, I have notes written down, but it's really just names, so I can remember who's what and where. So it's funny because we get a much bigger glimpse into the Lion and Luther's relationship and their thought processes, because this is sort of after Zahariel kills one of the the second to last remaining Lion of Caliban. And he finds out, well, he doesn't find out, but he harnesses the power of the warp. I think it's called Terror Sight or something of that regards, where he can use the warp to see into entities like he does with the Lion and finds a weak spot and just murders it. But it comes after this point where he's on this quest to kill the Lion or this beast of Caliban. And he comes back, and Nemiel was like, just everyone was kind of considered him dead because these beasts of Caliban are no joke. They're violent and they are chaos beasts. They are vicious and they are just cruel and chaos aligned. Like, it's even mentioned in the book that Zahariel can feel that there's a malice in this beast that isn't typical of normal predators. It's instead almost enjoying the fact that it's toying with Zahariel and making him suffer. Oh, all right. I'm going to backtrack a little bit. So Zahariel talks with the Watchers in the Dark while trying to find the Lion, and there's a really interesting point here that sort of alluded to his future fate. But I made the mistake of looking something up because I was like, I really like Zahariel. Let me look something up real quick, and because I wanted to know if he was, because they say Chapter Master a lot, and there was a point where I got confused of who was Chapter Master and who wasn't at this point. But I digress. The Watchers in the Dark are talking to Zahariel, and they had mentioned that, we have been here for, eons, and humanity is tampering with something they should not tamper with, and they're alluding to chaos, and Zahariel's like, I will, I've made an oath to the knightlyhood to vanquish all evil, and that includes the evil that which you speak of. And one of them says he has the taint within him, we should kill him now. That might be alluding to the fact that A, he'll turn traitor, or B, he's a psyker, and that kind of any indication of interacting with the warp will lead to some demonic corruption or whatnot. So that was a really cool thing too, because it alludes that Zahariel could possibly turn traitor, or Zahariel's fate is unknown. But then we get the first instance of the Watchers in the Dark, what they do, and how they sort of play a role or will play a role in the Dark Angels in the years to come. So it was interesting stuff, and they're unfathomable to us, and they even make it so if you were to try to comprehend us, you would go mad. For humans need to put names to things to understand them and to conceptualize them. They're really cool. I like mystery. I love the mystery of 40K, and I love the Watchers in the Dark because they're just so hidden. They're so old and they're unique. All right, I'll just stay at that. They're very unique and they're very cool. So moving on from that, the characterization of Luther and the Lion. So here's some fun stuff first. Luther says the Lion has a really good singing voice, and he sings the old songs of the Knights of Caliban, and it would make you cry. I thought that was hysterical because the Lion is not a social guy, and it was goofy. But I do have to say that Luther does a good job of describing who the Lion is, and it is true. Nobody knows the Lion better than Luther. Luther describes the Lion and says, my brother, my brother. And you can tell that Luther has genuine love and adoration for his brother, But we also get the early glimpses that the lion has made him feel inferior. The lion will always outdo him, and Luther's always in his shadow. And it's made note that if Luther would have been the best of the knights, if he had not been born in the same time as Lionel L. Johnson, which is a just awful thing to think about, because I think anybody can relate to a point where they felt their achievements have been overshadowed by someone else, and it sometimes feels like that could only just happen to you and only you. But I promise that's not the case. But anyway, it's interesting to see too, because we see these little seeds of resentment growing within Luther. But you can also tell Luther genuinely does respect, support, and will always follow the lion, but he's still human. Lionel L. Johnson is not, and he makes that known when he says, "The lion is the most loneliest man in the world. He is my brother, suffers a tragic fate." And he kind of rephrases that when he's talking to Zahariel after Zahariel comes back from killing the lion, because they're having a feast and he's just talking with him. And he says, my brother works on a different framework from all of us. He's a genius, and as such, his humor cannot be understood by us, which is kind of funny again, because the lion having humor is not something I would typically associate him with. And he's like, the lion works in mysterious ways. He's much smarter than us, and even I, who have been accustomed to his ways of thinking, still struggle to keep up. And it's really better building for the lion, because we're still getting glimpses of who he is, because this is really the first point of the story where he's introduced. So when we see the lion, he is very not empathetic. I think the best way to describe it is he's putting on this diplomatic aura of approach when he comes to Zahariel, and tries to treat him like a brother. But you have to remember, no one's of the status of a Primarch except the other Primarchs, and even then, they all have massive egos and kind of rank themselves higher than their brothers. So when he talks to Zahariel, he tries to make him comfortable, and he says, we have a brotherhood as well. And this obviously makes Zahariel go like, oh my god, what? And they're talking about the killing. They both killed the lions of Caliban, and as such, no one else can do that now, because they're all basically dead. And they have a brotherhood. And it's funny too. Well, it's not funny, but we get to see the lion just contemplate his place in the order and in Caliban. He loves Caliban and will do anything to protect it. But he has these dreams. And I say dreams because that's what he says, but I would like to believe it's the Emperor sending psychic thoughts to him that something's going to change very soon, that the stars come down to them. And they talk of Terra like it's a myth, because to them it is a myth. Terra is this far off distant land where all of humanity's originated from. But to them, Caliban is the only planet that matters, and there's no humanity outside of Caliban. But it's an interesting thing to think about. But we just get to see the lion in a more human-like portrayal, because I've read his Primarch book, and I'll be honest, this does a better job of setting up who the lion is than his Primarch book. But that's also fair, because this takes place in 30K, and I'm pretty sure so does his Primarch book, but it's way later towards, I think Luther probably was already exiled back to Caliban at this point. But regardless, that was just a personal aside. So then we kind of hop into part 3, which is, oh, nope, sorry. We're still on part 2. I was going to skip some major stuff. So, they do a crusade after Zahariel kills the lion of Caliban. Not the lion, but a lion of Caliban. And they go to kill the Knights of Lupus, and there's an interesting interaction there where they talk to the leader of the Knights of Lupus, and they've been trying to keep the great beasts of Caliban alive, because there's this really interaction that says, and the leader's talking to Zahariel, without these beasts, we have no purpose, and the purpose is the only thing that gives us, our meaning in life. We have to go kill and hunt because it's who we are and what we are, and if we don't do so, what are we? And it kind of is funny, because someone on the Reddit, because I was looking up people's thoughts on this, made a really good parallel to what it would be like for the Great Crusade. Without the Great Crusade and killing of these Xenos and making these lost worlds of humanity compliant, they have no purpose and whatnot. I thought that was an interesting, really good parallel that person made, and it is an interesting thing to think about. Although I don't know if it's supposed to be thought of that deep. I enjoyed that line of thinking. So that being said, when we jump into the last chapter of part 2, going into part 3, the Dark Angels, but they're not called as such, they're just called the First Legion, show up, and everyone's on edge, but then, the Lion is like telling them to chill out. Holt and the Luther is on edge, everyone's on edge, but they see the Space Marines. And then it flashes forward to a couple months where Zahariel and Nemiel are doing their tasks. I think they're either trying to train to be Space Marines or they're just doing training or whatnot. I don't remember off the top of my head. But there's a brother who comes up to Zahariel. I think his name is Brother. Oh my God. Raphael. Oh my God. Well, the guy's a psyker, and I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but it was Brother something. Brother Ishmaelis is Raphael. Is Raphael. There it is. Is Raphael. He's a psyker, he's a librarian, and he is interested in Zahariel because he sees that he can harness the warp, and of course he can, and they talk about the Emperor and how Zahariel's really interested in the Emperor because he sounds like such a great man, and that he's basically the father of the Lion, and now I forgot his name again. Oh my God, I just said it. But he goes in. The brother librarian goes into the fact that everyone in the First Legion is basically the son of the Primarch, and he explains Primarchs and all these stories and whatnot to Zahariel. But needless to say, they go on with their sort of training and whatnot. And then we flash forward again. There's a plot to kill the Emperor by the old knights of Caliban, because essentially with the Imperium coming and colonizing Caliban, they're sort of phasing out the need of the knights, and the knights are, now subject to the Imperium, and they want to kill the Emperor. And Nemiel brings in Zahariel to this meeting where they reveal they want to kill the Emperor, and then flash forward to the parade celebrating the arrival of the Emperor. We have what is, Zahariel stopping it, but then getting accused of being a traitor, and brother is Raphael. I remembered it. Comes back, and he's interrogating him with another Space Marine. And then all of a sudden, Israphael wants Zahariel to be innocent, so he doesn't probe too super deep into the story. But obviously, since he's a psyker, he can probe into the mind of Zahariel. And this leads to a cool not intro, but Jimmy Space makes an appearance, and it's cool because he's, Israphael's like talking to the other Space Marine brother. He's not lying. And then Golden Light, Jimmy Space says, he tells the truth. And that's kind of how the guy in the audiobook says it. And they all were kneeling, and the Emperor says to Zahariel, I owe you a great debt. But he makes sure that all of this is forgotten because he doesn't want the first seeds of treachery to be sown in the legions, because again, this was treachery, but he doesn't want this to ever be known. And this also leads to a really interesting thing. Was there other traitorous events that taken place that the Emperor's made people simply forget? Just a thought. And then again, I know we flash forward, and we're kind of edging into farthest into the last chapters of Imperium, where Nemiel and Zahariel are Space Marines, and Luther has been genetically augmented to be an enhanced human. And then we go to part 4, which was Crusade. In Crusade, they fight these people called the Saroshi, and they are intermingling with demons, but nobody knows why. And there's a White Scar who tells Zahariel, I think his name is Kurgis, tells Zahariel, you cannot do this, don't trust them, or, it sucks that you guys are guarding this planet, but don't trust them, they're evil. And of course, they try to summon a demon, and they're all evil. And then this sort of leads to Luther, Zahariel getting sent back to Caliban at the end, and they view this as a slight. And Luther is just distraught, and that's basically the book in and of itself. And again, I'm going to say it's basically filler. I'll be honest. It's a weird little, wapow, like whiplash of going from Fulgrim to early 30K and then jumping back to Great Crusade 30K. It's a journey, but it's a good journey. I enjoyed it. I do have to say, I'll be honest, there were parts where it was slow. It was very slow at some parts, but I enjoyed that the Dark Angels interacting with the White Scars. I enjoyed the Knights of Caliban, the Knights of Lupus, all of it. It was very. I love like Arthurian legend and old Albia and all that stuff, and that's basically what Caliban is. It's basically Legend of Arthur style, but more hardcore. So I mean, it was a good book. Was it my favorite out of everything so far? No. It was just good. It really that's it. It was just good. It wasn't outstanding. It wasn't, the characters themselves were mid, which is a weird thing to say for me because I really enjoy a lot of the characters and they're not and that's what they're not bad. They're just okay. I really like Sahariel, but I did that dumb thing of looking him up and finding out his fate, and I was really surprised because apparently, this, I'm gonna just spoiler alert here if you're unfamiliar with this or don't want to know, but I'm sure most of you probably know more than I do. Apparently, Zahariel becomes like the first of the fallen, which is not how I pictured it. I figured Nemiel would be the first because Zahariel seems to really love the Lion, the Emperor, and even Luther. He seems extremely close to Luther, which is something I didn't really think. It makes sense, I suppose, but it's not something I took a great amount of time to ponder or think about. But I was like, whoa, interesting. It was interesting, and there were a lot of interesting characters, specifically Cipher, the title. Ooh, the title of Cipher, because first old man Cipher kind of just disappears and dies. Second Cipher was remarked as having mysterious goals, and it was a mysterious man who no one ever found out his true intentions. And I have to wonder, is this the same Cipher? And I'm going to say probably not, because I subscribe to the theory that current day Cipher is Omegon, because that just sounds cool to me. But I mean, there were a lot of really good parts in this book. The worst parts were probably, honestly, I don't. It would probably be the end because in Imperium, it's revealed that Luther could have just let this nuclear bomb go off and could have damaged everybody in the Lion's reputation, and he could have controlled it all, but he doesn't. And he says, I made this mistake. But the Lion is my brother, and I do love him." And you know, I didn't really. It was good, but it wasn't. It's really how you could summarize this book. It was good, but it wasn't great. You know what I'm saying? It was an enjoyable read, but I'll just be honest. I've enjoyed the other books a lot better, and this is coming from someone who's a Dark Angels fan and a Lion fan. So it wasn't the best, but it was good. I'm excited for Legion. I'm sure that's going to be very interesting. I still have to finish a couple books though. I still have to finish Aramin, and I think I'm almost done with the Caiaphas Cain, the first really really big book. So yeah. Other than that, guys, if you have read the book and you have anything to say, or just want to talk about the book itself or other up and coming novels for the Heresy series, because I figured since I've already started reading them and I've been sort of logging them differently, I might as well just continue the trend right here and just keep logging them onto YouTube. So if you guys want to keep talking about the book, if you've read it or if I missed something and you want to just let me know in the comments, feel free to. Otherwise, I might go buy Legion later, but other than that, I'm out of here. If you like the video, I appreciate it. If you like the video so much you want to stick around and listen to more these little book reviews and whatnot, it's also appreciated. But other than that, I am out of here.